Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Cronin at Statewide News Service and jbiztechphilly.com.
Well, Rabbi, we have an assemblywoman on with us today, Claudia Tenney, who has one of the longest or the longest district in the sprawling district of the 101st Assembly District. She goes from Utica all the way down to Orange County. And it's just seven counties. Seven counties it stretches through. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I think it's an honor to be on.
So you've put on quite a few miles on your...
I do. I have a couple. Well, I had a car before I got this district, so I have a Buick, which doesn't get great gas mileage, but I made all my payments on it, so I don't want to buy another car. And then I have a Mini Cooper, which I use for more local driving.
You get compensated? Is there any compensation from the assembly for all the miles?
Not for any driving you do in your district. We get compensated for one round trip from your home to Albany during a session week, and that's it. Unless you have some other business. I don't really. But Albany's only less than halfway to the end of my district, so I go through Albany. I take the thruway sometimes to get all the way down to like Ellenville, and which is one of the furthest parts of my district, or into Orange County, Walden. Or Sullivanville, or Sullivan County, which is never synced.
So going around during the summer and visiting people.
Yeah, to take the local roads, it's a long drive. It's probably 4 hours.
I was going to say, there's no major highway within your district.
Route 28.
That's the major highway in your district, the two-lane
highway. It's a lot of local roads, which is why I push for CHIPS funding. And our roads are in really poor shape too, might add, because the local roads have been denied their funding for a long time. So.
And you've been an assemblywoman since when?
I was first elected in 2010 in the old 115th, which was redistricted in 2012. So you're there 5 years. This is my 5th year.
And you're already on some powerful committees like the Education Committee.
No, I guess it's powerful. I don't know.
Well, it is.
We're hoping.
So, but...
Yeah, education codes.
And you're also on the Ethics Committee?
No, I'm not on Ethics.
Okay.
No, I'd like to be.
You should update your website.
I've never been on Ethics Committee.
There's $5-6 billion.
Oh, I know what I did with the the
$6 billion surplus. They were going to fix roads. Did they ever get to?
There's some that went to roads. I really think that I would. What concerned me the most, and actually I was just talking about this with one of my colleagues who were very big advocates of the CHIPS funding, the Consolidated Highway Program, and CHIPS has been kind of flat, the funding, for many, many years, so we haven't really done a lot.
What does CHIPS stand for
Consolidated Highway Investment Fund, or
plan. To fix the roads,
to fix local roads. So it's money that we take from the state and we give it to the local government so that they can repair their local roads. A lot of them are, the state highways are covered, but we have a lot of local roads, county routes. And I think 87% of the roads in New York State are actually local roads. So our CHIPS funding has been flat for so long, and we were just talking about it, and that what upset us a lot about the budget, especially me, and I voted no on the budget for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is that there were all these huge pots of money with very sort of vague descriptions about where the money was going to go that were put in the hands of the governor, and the governor basically has almost full discretion to decide where this money is going to go. And I find that objectionable as a taxpayer. Actually, our budget process requires that we match appropriations and we match revenues, and was not really done with these huge, pots of money that are substantial, almost $1 billion that he had to give out. So I would like to see some of that one-time windfall, as you call it. They call it a windfall. Some people said it was part of the budget. It's the settlement, from the J.P. Morgan Chase Fund. So I would like to see a lot of it go, especially to our local governments who are really struggling in New York. So.
And are they using the CHIPS money for every other road but in your district? I'm just joking.
CHIPS, the reason why I like the CHIPS formula is because the CHIPS formula is a sensible, it gives the formula, the money goes through, and it's based on where the money's needed, the size of it, a lot of factors go into play, and it's the most fair and equitable way of distributing the money on roads.
So when you talk about education, how do you feel about the education investment tax credit?
Well, I support it. I thought it was, yes, I do. I did not understand why, I think it was distorted. A lot of people said, these 6 billionaires that are running this country they're going to come in and dominate what's happening with education tax credit, and therefore you're going to end up with, with them running and dictating the schools anyway. But I don't think that was right. I think there are a lot of people, especially in local communities, small communities like mine. I live in New Hartford, New York, people are interested, like my mother, who's not a billionaire. She's not even a millionaire, barely. She is interested maybe in part of her estate in giving some money to a local school. It could be a public school. It doesn't have to be a charter school or a private school. And why wouldn't she want to give it to New Hartford Community Foundation, which is, our school district, I think it's the Hartford Education Community Foundation. Not sure the exact word. But this bill would allow you to give it to public education. And why would we not want that to happen? Tax credits, we know, drive people to supporting education. So it also gives the parents and local school districts and empowers them, takes some of that power away from the state. They have the control over the money. Let's bring it back to where it is. We're the ones that vote on it locally in our school districts. Why shouldn't we empower the people that are paying the tax bill?
Now they're saying they may tweak that EITC the way it was passed in the Senate, and they're trying to come up with some sort of compromise.
Well, I guess they're trying to come up with a way to so it doesn't get dominated by maybe some city downstate interests who have a ton of money who may try to influence education. But to me, we use tax credits for everything. Look at the very controversial Hollywood tax credit that Governor Cuomo is using. Look at the money that's just flooding into New York City because of a tax credit. And people say, well, people should just give money anyway, regardless of a tax credit. That doesn't always happen. People have incentives for wanting to put their money somewhere. If there's a tax credit that you could use to give to some other industry or some other charitable foundation, why wouldn't you give it to them if you got a benefit? It's human nature. You're not going to fight human nature forever.
Now, because this is the first time that you're on our show, I like to introduce you to our audience, and I want people to know, you're a former journalist?
We owned a newspaper, my family.
Your family owned the newspaper?
Yeah.
But did you ever write, you write a blog?
Every week. I was the editor and the publisher, so.
Okay, so you're a former journalist?
Yes, right.
Okay, so
well, yeah, when I say what we did is we had a weekly newspaper called the Mid-York Weekly, which was founded by my grandfather in 1946. And it was a consolidation of 3 different newspapers in our region, which dated back to like 1820 over in central New York. And he consolidated them, and we called it the Mid-York Weekly. And my grandfather was a publisher, then my grandmother, and then my mother, and then me. And so when I took over the paper, it was in 1997, we had a newspaper division, but we also had penny savers and shopper divisions.
Which are free publications.
Free publications. Well, actually, we turned the Mid-York Weekly into a free publication, but we still were able to get the...
Because advertising, you make it up with advertising.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, so we started to put more news, so we renamed the Penny Saver division, called it the Mid-York Weekly and Penny Saver. So the front part, which was news stories, we also published... we also had the classifieds and the regular advertising and inserts in like regular newspaper or weekly. But when I wrote, of course, I wrote on a lot of controversial political topics, and I felt that I was doing the best that I could to point out to the public, what our local dailies were not doing.
Yeah.
And they tend to protect the status quo, even though they claim they don't. I was an equal opportunity critic. I went after Republicans and Democrats alike, whoever was not doing their job or not living up to their oath. And I thought people thought it was controversial, but I've always felt that was my obligation. We had very, very busy letter writing. We had a lot of letters to the editor. We put whatever anybody wanted to put in, as long as it wasn't, libelous.
Defamatory or something.
And we carried insurance for that as well. We had some. We never had any issues, but I was always very careful with that.
Right.
And
you're an attorney, so
right.
Well,
that's what I did first.
When you say you're careful about that, you're an attorney, so you always have that legal mind aspect.
I'm always everybody's thinking about making sure you don't get sued. You want to plan for the future. But that's what I did first. I intended to be a lawyer. My father was a Supreme Court judge. And I practiced law, became a partner in my law firm after 4 years in Utica area. I did a variety of, all different kinds of work, from commercial, residential real estate. I even did personal injury. I did quite a bit of divorce work and family court. And it was just sort of by chance that I ended up in our newspaper business. I was the lawyer for the business, but then some things changed, and there I am, the publisher. And that's what sort of backdoored me into politics, I have to say.
And you have children.
I have one son, yes.
One son. And is your son going to, I mean, he's in the military or whatever?
He's a Marine.
So he's a Marine. But where's the next generation to carry on the family tradition?
We sold the newspaper division in 200004.
For how much?
Yeah. This is a political show, not a business show.
Well,
look at him
you,
for how
a question
much?
you would ask.
Might not, but it's
You would ask me.
If you were a government or public organization, I could look you up. But
Look, it doesn't hurt to ask. That's the way I look at it.
that's fine. That's
okay.
bold
But you're not
of you.
telling-
Is your son,
but you're not
definitely want to
telling
say,
me.
is your son ready to go back into local, into the
No,
business after?
I don't think so.
He's a career soldier.
I don't know. Well, we sold our business in 2004. We had two divisions. We had the pharmaceutical packaging and printing division. We did a lot of printing. It was based in Hamilton, New York,
Yes.
and now we're in Sherburne because we had started in Norwich. And my son, so far, doesn't seem to have any real interest in that. He went to the U.S. Naval Academy, graduated in
Oh, very
2013.
good. So he's an
and
officer then.
commissioned as a Marine, and he loves being a Marine at the moment. He's only been there for a couple of years. Next month he'll be a first lieutenant and get his first promotion. And
Usually people who go through Naval Academy become a career. I mean,
depends. I mean, not
Really?
everybody does. I don't know what he wants. He's getting a master's degree right now in computer
Really?
science online at night, while he's working full time as a Marine. And
And you're proud of him.
Yeah, he's
The Marines, and we're proud.
He's a great guy.
That's
Yeah.
right,
Well, the Marines are like no other.
That's right.
I've learned that for sure.
Well, your
Yeah.
former state chairman, Bill Powers, was a Marine.
I heard that.
you
Yeah,
know.
I met him.
And he certainly went ahead and reined in the Republican Party around the state like a Marine would.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they're strong-willed people.
That's
My
right.
son is strong, but he assures me that the most intelligent people and the most thoughtful in all of the services are the Marines.
Really?
So that's what he says.
people sometimes say not. They're the guys that go on the front line.
That's what they say, but
doesn't,
he told me. He said
All right,
that's
How
what
old
he
is your
says.
son?
He's 23.
23.
Very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your husband?
I'm divorced, but for a long time. I've been single for a number of years. But he was also a naval officer, so he was in a submarine. And he still lives in the area. He lives, and that's how we ended up back in Utica, not really expecting to do that. He was on his way to Chicago to go to Northwestern Business School, and I was going to go practice law there because we met when I was in law school, and I ended up, my parents were panicking that nobody was living at home, so, and they said how great everything was. We moved back, and within a few years, Griffiths Air Force Base closed, GE left, Lockheed, everybody left, so it's been a struggle in central New York.
You talk about strong-minded. You must be strong-minded. I mean, I listened to you in many of your speeches, but I mean, just a general idea to be a Republican and you're less than 1/3 of the assembly, to talk up, and even I think your reputation as Republican is to be, strong-minded and maybe even buck the system. I mean, it's good.
I've never really thought of myself as a Republican. I don't I think of myself as a common sense person. I would say I'm probably more conservative in that way. And conservative I define as if we're going to do a task. For example, I took an oath of office. It's a big deal when you go take an oath of office. When I took my oath of office, what did I swear to do? To uphold the U.S. Constitution and the federal Constitution and the state Constitution. So I obviously am very well versed in the U.S. Constitution, or fairly well, as a law student and someone who's involved in federal law cases. I have in my history, and to me, that's extremely important to know what the Constitution says about it. It's actually one of the most liberal documents that's been created in the history of mankind, but people don't realize it's more of the traditional liberal it's not progressive.
I don't know how many people even know what's in the Constitution.
That's true, but they
That
isn't that
also.
sad? They should know, because you take an oath.
I just want to say, I know I'm letting you talk, but
Go ahead.
That's
Ask questions.
the Jewish view, and that's just something the American people could learn from Jews, because every week we read a portion of the 5 books of Moses in the synagogue. And, listen, I heard it 100 times. I've learned it. I hear it. But the rabbis say, no, you're going to listen to it every week. Just say, I know it. I don't have to listen. No, you're going to be there, and you're going to hear it again. And that's, I think, the American people, the education system could learn from that.
I agree
How
with you
many people
100%. You know
even
why?
know what part of being American is? Because they don't review it, or
Right.
they learned it in 8th grade sometime, and they forgot it, or they half learned it. And I think something they could learn from being Jewish, just to review that, just to be American citizen, you should know
I
what's
love him
happening.
for saying this because
Yeah.
guess what? When I read the constitutional provisions back in 8th grade and when we were taking history and then again in college and then law school, and now that I'm actually in practice, looking at constitutional issues, also worked on federal cases, boy, my view of the Constitution is a lot different than it used to be. And I see more to it. I see more things. My life has affected it. And that's why it's so important for us to continue to look at it and talk about it and refresh our memories, just like it would be to look at Scripture, whether you're Jewish or Catholic or whatever you are. Mm-hmm. It's important to continue to remember there's some wisdom that was handed down to us from generations. Mm-hmm. And I think we forget about that. And even the state constitution. I have a copy of the state constitution in my desk. And I have all kinds of things, identified in it. Because Andy Goodell and I know you should have him on your show someday. He's delightful. We enjoy going through that, but you have to take these things seriously. It's not like today I voted no on a particular bill. It was a very well-intentioned bill, but it was poorly drafted. And the way it was drafted, in fact, was unconstitutional. And we pointed that out. Go back and redraft it. Instead of redrafting the bill and putting it in properly, to affect what they wanted to do, which is to help children who are, exposed to, chemicals in their clothing or whatever. Go back and do the bill properly, so it's constitutional and it passes all muster and is the best we can do. Instead, they all doubled down and said, "Well, we think it's constitutional," or why not just do it right? I mean, it's real common sense stuff. So when you say Republican or conservative, sometimes I look and go, "Where are these people from? What are they thinking?" This is just. I think running a business, being a lawyer, being a mother, having a son as a Marine, all those things have changed my worldview. And yet, I love to go back to the basics. As you say, you go back to the rabbi every week, and he says you got to look at the basics. You got to see what is your framework. Where do you stand on all these issues? There's real important things that
It keeps
that
you
change
focused.
It keeps you focused. You realize you get off track, and
You know what I learned being around the state legislature for 35 years. And
it's so funny.
What I learned was there are some Democrats who think the only good Republican is a dead Republican. And there are some Republicans who think the only good Democrat's a dead Democrat.
Yeah, that's
And
I don't.
They're the extremes.
And they are.
And then there are
and
people
that's-
like you and me who we could deal with whatever title or whatever party affiliation, and we can get along. We can all get along. There used to be times when Saul Weprin was the Speaker of the Assembly where he would have a poker game in his hotel room.
Oh, the good old days.
And everyone, Republican, Democrat, didn't matter, would come to the poker game. It's sort of like, all right, you fought it out on the floor of the legislature. Now we're leaving, and we're going to leave all that stuff behind, and we're going to go become a mensch, and we're going to be friendly to each other. We're going to forget about the titles and the affiliations.
I find that I really learn a lot from a lot of my Democratic colleagues. I'm very close to a lot of them. Of course, I sit, in the end with a lot, and we share a lot of the same views. The question is, those of us who are there, they can't get some of their bills out either. It's the same frustration. And I share a lot of their views on a lot of issues. I don't think that we differ so much. I mean, maybe in the approach sometimes, and that's why I think that there is a lot of common ground, but for whatever reason, there's an awful lot of media that likes to talk about, they're all fighting and they're all getting. I look at it as the problem. Like, I don't know if it's as much in our area as it is, say in like D.C. People say, well, they need to be more bipartisan. There's all this fighting going on.
Needs more
Our
camaraderie,
framers did not plan for us to get along. We're supposed to be arguing about these principles. They're so important that in the end, yes, we should come together on some things. But my biggest worry, and especially in D.C., is that they're too much of a cabal together. They get along too well, and they forget about the people they represent. I find that that's part of what's going on sometimes in Albany.
There are legislators who have left Albany to go to other local government jobs or whatever, because there's very little camaraderie left in the Capitol, in the state legislature. It's like everyone goes off into their own denizen or their own areas, and they don't come together after work to be more to be
I
more
don't
folksy
find
with
that.
each
I
other.
think I do. I see my colleagues, regardless of party, all the time. We go
Well, at
out, we talk
receptions,
about
but
dinner.
not-
No, I have friends, and some of them were former assembly members or in the Senate. Some of them are Democrats. We get together and we talk about issues and get.
So
it's
who's your
not,
favorite Democrat?
Who's my favorite Democrat? I love Mike Simanowicz.
Oh, okay.
Actually, he's conservative, but
That's right.
I enjoy because he sits and torments me throughout the whole thing. I enjoy working with him. We do some legislation together. Amy Paulin, I like working with her. We have good legislation that she's really great. She was a champion of the human trafficking bill. She
Right.
stood up and they wouldn't separate it, and she made sure. She said, I put the same legislation in. She said, I don't care. I'm going to go on your bill. You go on mine. Let's get this thing out. And she persevered, and we got the human trafficking
Did you
bill.
hear
finally.
her speech, whether it was on videotape or whatever, about when they brought up the rape bill? And how she talked about the time when she was...
Yeah. Well, that was on the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you meant like in a separate
No,
event.
no, on the
Yeah,
floor.
I mean, she has-
that was powerful.
She has a lot of legislation that I like. I don't necessarily support all of it, but she does put a lot of time and effort into her
Yes.
bills. And as do a number of a lot of people. I go through all the Democrats' support memos and try to see which bills I think that are good bills, or I think of an idea that I'd like to find and like to put through, and then I look and see if who's got it already. I find that there's a lot of great ideas out there. Some of the frustrating things are, I had a bill sitting on the Veterans Committee for 4 years, and this year I put it in again, and all of a sudden one of the new Democrats put it in, identical bill, and it was voted out. It was held in committee for 4 years, but there's no pride in ownership. If I can get that bill to the floor and it helps the veterans who I'm representing, then that's what you got to
That's
do.
right.
I don't like that system. I don't think it's right. I think what happened today in the Codes Committee, where we had probably over 100 people come in who are pro-Second Amendment, stand around the Codes Committee, and they held our bills and would let them come to the floor
And
for an up or down vote. They were there were 2 Repeal Safe Act bills. There were a
okay.
number of bills. There were
Oh,
30
see.
or so bills.
Okay.
And they wouldn't let them to the floor for an up or down vote. Why not?
Okay.
Why not let them,
And there's no way...
now, if a Democrat sponsored those bills,
Right.
likely they would come to the floor for a vote.
But in the Senate, they have a way where the Democrat minority has a way of petitioning to have a bill brought to the floor.
Well, the Democrats and the Assembly and the Senate Republicans actually instituted the reforms that we proposed to the Assembly Democrats that were
Okay.
resoundingly rejected. We'll deal with that later when the budget's over. I'm like, well, the most important vote we take all year is the budget, so why don't we do it before? We
Okay.
still haven't taken up any of those reforms that I think we should be taking up.
Just again, the Jewish view to bring out with the Talmud. If you read the Talmud, they're arguing about everything. They would say Jews are always arguing about the two Jews, 3 opinions. But it is true. But that's what I'm saying. On the other hand, it's like, well, you're just to round it off. You can argue, but you don't, think, oh, you're arguing, so you must hate each other, right?
Absolutely
no,
not.
You argue, and then they're the best friends. So I think, again,
Because
that's...
there's
I think you're
respect.
right. Come to the dinner table, and when you come to our family, you can imagine we have half Democrats, half Republicans. And everybody's got a different view on something, and
you can respect
it's
people
exciting
on the
and
same
fun.
thing, yeah.
And that's what it is.
Right.
People are more respectful of you because you have an opinion, you have an eloquent way of saying what words come out of your mouth and what points you want to make. So therefore...
Thank you. Are you saying me personally?
You personally and
well,
others
yeah.
around. And that's where that respect, I don't see, I said camaraderie, but I don't see the same respect that I saw 25 years ago in the legislature. And it's very interesting.
I guess I don't know that. There is some respect there. I think sometimes it doesn't get covered, and people don't always
But I'm sitting
see
there
it.
in the legislature. I'm sitting there, and I just don't see it as much
It depends
as... I'm not
on-
saying there isn't. I just don't see it as much as I saw it 25 years ago.
I would like to
That's it.
see us getting together more and doing more of what the rabbi is talking about. I'd like to see us all kind of discussing the issues. There's nothing wrong with discussion. We were called the marketplace of ideas. All these ideas that come from the founding of our country are really important to discuss issues. That's how they came up with all this, the Bill of Rights. We couldn't have the Constitution. New York wouldn't accept it. They were the 11th state.
right.
We want a Bill of Rights. We want the 10th Amendment. We want to preserve our sovereignty. We don't want this federal government to come in and take over. And yet, you talk about Americans, most Americans don't realize that the states created the federal government. Little things like that that people don't learn
And I
in
was
history.
just listening to Steve Aquario talk about local governments. He's the head of the executive director of the Association of Counties, and he was saying how the U.S. Constitution was modeled on the New York State Constitution, and he was giving all this history from the 1700s that was absolutely phenomenal about how we came to where we are, in 1776. And
Well,
it was like,
look, New York State is one of the richest historical places there is in the United States. I mean, a lot of important things happen in New York State.
I wanted you to bring up something because you brought it up on. I've heard you talk about this before.
Okay.
And it goes to the point of people having outside income, and as an attorney, you have an outside income, and reporting it, and how do you, and the ethics involved in all of that.
Right. So since I have this district that's
right,
180 miles long or whatever, I have no outside income last year because I just can't. How can I? I've done some pro bono work for my family or my neighbors. I might do a will or something, but I have no time. I'm in my car, and you really can't deliver anything while you're in your car.
I thought I had heard you say you did like a divorce case, or you did something.
I have a divorce case that I'm working on that is for a friend of mine who is my son's best friend's mother. So she pays the filing fee. I do it for nothing.
I see.
It's more like that. In the old days, I used to have time, but I really don't have. It's a no-fault divorce, so I don't have a lot of time to do this kind of stuff. And one of the biggest cases that has kept me from really earning any income, and I've earned some income. I mean, I represent our family business. I do our financing. I do our work, but I'm also a shareholder and an owner. And I have been since I turned 25, so it's been part of my life.
What's the family business?
The Mid-York Press.
But you said you sold that.
We sold the print. We sold the newspaper division. We still own the pharmaceutical packaging division. So that's what that's the so-called outside income.
Oh, okay.
That I own a business that I've owned since I'm 54 years old now, so I've owned it for quite a long time. Yeah.
You look a lot better than I do.
Oh, gee, thank you. Well, I have the advantage of hair, right?
Okay.
So,
and he's 29.
Well, I was 29. I'm 29 too, but
All right,
I sell it.
That was a good year.
Yeah. Altogether, I'm not 29, but I can stop anywhere.
Yeah.
But so one of the things I've done that I started back in 2005, I started a big, huge pro bono case in federal court where I represent a man and his family, a guy named Melvin Phillips, and this is the guy, the Native American. He's a 100% Oneida Indian, and I've been working on his case pro bono, which cost me thousands of hours, and actually I pay the filing fees, I pay for all the federal bar stuff that you have to do in order to maintain the case. And last year, I gave up the case because I ran for Congress. So even though I could still be the counsel on it, I just gave the case to another attorney who is, locally, and another guy who's helping the case is in Cooperstown area, who's a retired Native American expert. So I gave that case up, but he's still a friend, and I'm still have a great interest in the case and where it's proceeding. So that case was thousands and thousands of hours of pro bono work and very complex constitutional work, and it was a very difficult case.
Keeps you sharp.
But it was, I'm consumed with it. I want to do a movie on this guy. I want to do whatever I can do on this. It's just such an interesting case.
Does it have to do with him? Is he suing the Oneida Nation?
Well, he's suing the federal government.
He's suing the federal. So why isn't Ray Halberter representing him? He's a Harvard grad.
We're suing Ray Halberter.
No, but
basically.
you're suing Ray. Okay.
Well, not Ray Halberter is not an Oneida Indian. That's what we determined, and no, he's not a blood Oneida.
Oh.
So we are trying to get him to not. He's trying to take Melvin Phillips' land away from him.
Oh, okay.
So it's a complex.
I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah, and nobody knows because the media won't talk about it.
Oh, I would.
Well, I've tried. Believe me, I've stood up in live stream national audiences and whatever I could to get the attention. And my client is poor. He lives in poverty. He refuses to take any money from the casino. And he's really an amazing guy. He's, cares about his family and preserving their culture and their tradition. They've lived on this land for generations, and
interesting. Wow.
And he's the real deal. And what happened is one day he said, Halberter's not really Oneida by blood, and that's what his self-made constitution requires, that you're 1/4 Oneida.
Sure. No, I was
by
there,
matrilineal descent. And I said, come on, Melvin, where am I going to get this information? So I spent, many, many hours in the National Archives, the state archives. working with the Mormon church because they have really
Right.
detailed genealogy records, got all the information, and lo and behold, through matrilineal descent, Ray Halberter, not only is he not Oneida, he's only 1/4 possibly Canadian of Indian descent, and he's not eligible to even be the leader of the Oneida Nation. That's why he's not a chief. He's forbidden from entering the traditional longhouse of the, the great, the Council of Chiefs. He's not even.
That's
I mean, so
amazing
it's
that
the
Mario
whole.
Cuomo didn't even do the research when he.
Do you really think they didn't know? There's an
Yeah.
awful lot of money at stake there.
I don't think they know.
I know they knew. I'm
Okay.
sure. Yes.
No,
You don't believe
okay.
it?
I'm telling you,
They may not have known that he was
Not Oneida, right.
I don't think they bothered to make much of an inquiry, though.
I think they tried to check into it. They
Not on that
No.
issue.
okay.
I doubt it.
Well, we'll agree
That's
to
okay.
disagree over here.
Yeah, well, I'll show you. I just,
But
yeah, there we go.
but
See,
you-
we can disagree.
You also had
he
an-
isn't disagreeing with me. He just
No.
doesn't know.
You have involvement with with Yugoslavia.
Well, I lived in the former Yugoslavia when I
Okay.
was a student, and then I went and worked for the consulate
Right.
in,
And the
during the
Olympics?
Olympics in
Yeah.
Sarajevo, and then went back and studied Croatian.
Okay.
And took a course, in between college and law school, and dragged all my family and friends there for years, and actually worked with our local Jewish community center to bring the Bosnians to Utica. Oddly enough, that's
Yeah.
that's who the Bosnians owe their existence to, is our
Really?
Jewish community center in Utica. They were the ones that reached out to bring the refugees here during the war.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
was
why I
that.
needed to bring it in the last few seconds. we
Yeah,
had, but-
it's
Okay.
they were. It was really great. And my son went to the after-school program at the Jewish Community Center. He was at JCC, for years,
Wow.
and played basketball there and played. This is a great. We have a great JCC,
Excellent.
so it was wonderful for him. And then I got involved because they said, "Oh, gee." Well, the funny thing is, my father always said, "What are you learning that language for? Why don't you learn Spanish?" And I said, "Well, I just want to learn a language. I just want to learn. I learned French in high school. I was never that good at it, but I really wanted to learn a language." So. Lo and behold, they moved to me. Now we have 7,000 Bosnian refugees in Utica, and I can go into stores and buy traditional food. You can go to the coffee shops. I can speak the language with them.
That's
So
such an
it kind of
amazing
came
aspect
full
of
circle
your
on
life.
that.
That's a
Yeah.
phenomenal aspect.
And I think we're out of time.
Okay, well,
Unfortunately, that
thank
is
you so much.
unfortunate. We're having a good time, and we have more to talk
Yeah.
about. So you'll just have to come again to the
Thank
Jewish
you.
Youth.
No,
Thank you very
I
much
feel like
for being
I
here.
wanted to hear more about you from what you had to say.
Well, maybe
But
you'll
thank
have
you.
him in your paper. Or,
Yeah, you can come.
know.
Why don't you come on Fred Dicker with me?
Oh, okay, there you go.
He invites
Thank you.
me, I'll come.
Much success, Claudia.
Thank you. I
Success.
appreciate that.